Hello. I apologize for the tech issues. I tried going live at 8 and it gave me problems. It said that it couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi, but my Wi-Fi is working just fine on other apps on my phone, even on YouTube itself. It's letting me do all sorts of things. It just isn't letting me live stream from this channel for some reason. No idea why. But I do not have time to figure it out. So what I'm gonna do instead, you're gonna get this a little bit late, but I'm going to make a short video, this one right here, and I'm gonna instant premiere it, so it's not gonna come out at the time it was supposed to, but it will still come out, the same day, and you already know that because you're watching it, although maybe you don't know, maybe you don't know when it was posted if you're not watching it live. So anyway, let's just get right into this. How will be remembered? That's what I called it. So what do I mean by that? I was thinking about this earlier today, the concept of, looking back on what once was and realizing, oh, we've changed so much since then. We look back and we're like, wow, there was a time where we came to America and killed a bunch of people and spread diseases and stole the land and then owned slaves and then had a war, somehow a civil war, about whether or not it was okay to own slaves, to own another human being. And we look back on that now and we're thinking, that's insane. How were we ever that stupid? And, we assume that we have evolved past that there's no longer an element of racism because the slaves were black people. There's no longer an element of, hating people for something they can't control about themselves. But the truth is, that's still very much there. And there are a lot of things we're doing today that we would look back, hopefully look back in the future if there is one, and think, wow, what were we doing? And I was imagining myself just having a conversation with my kids somewhere down the line after we've fixed a lot of the problems we have. And what I imagined myself saying was, when I was a kid, we had, mainly referring to the US, but I know it's, unfortunately, pretty much anywhere you go in the world, there's going to be some version of this problem, where the general public, the majority of humans, have allowed a small percentage of other humans to hoard all of the power, all of the money, all of the food, all of the luxury of any kind, hoarding it for themselves, and kind of, picking and choosing who they're going to distribute it to. It's a little bit like, no, it's exactly like the movie The Hunger Games, and that series, it's a trilogy, it's a book trilogy, and they made 4 movies out of it. They made a 5th movie because they made a 4th book. It's a prequel, but The Hunger Games is kind of the same thing, where it's like the Capitol, they have all of the power, and they hoard it while everyone else suffers. And just to prove a point about keeping the peace, every year they pick a male and a female from each of the 12 poor districts and force them to compete and kill each other in a game, while all of the rich people in the capital just laugh and watch and think of it as just a fun time while people are dying and trying to kill each other. This is such a depressing and accurate reflection of what we have in the world, where you have like reality TV shows, people trying to just, this is how I worded it when I was imagining myself talking to my kid. It was like, back in the day when I was a kid, The majority of people allowed a very small percentage of people to have all of the money and power, and they just let it happen. They starved and could barely afford to have like the bare minimum of just being alive. Um, and they were constantly just letting corruption slip by and not doing anything about it. And they'd always be complaining, which is what's so ironic, complaining about working, complaining about keeping food on the table, complaining about everything under the sun, but never actually doing anything about it. And the weirdest thing we did was that we started villainizing minorities, meaning people who are just different, not by choice, but just by the way that they are, the way that their brains work, the way that they present themselves and want to be seen. They challenge what is presented as normal. And in older, tribes and cultures and religions and different faiths, people who were different were seen as someone to learn from, because you learn from difference. You don't learn from the same thing. If you just do the same thing every day, you're never learning anything. You can only learn when something new comes in. So people who were different were seen as someone to, uphold and not to shoot down and think of as bad. But somehow we have these people who have all of this power and are hoarding it, and we don't see them as the villain. We see these people who are just born different as the problem. I can't make it sound less insane than it is. I somehow the people who believe that try to find ways to make it sound less insane than it is, but that is still what they're saying. If you cut it down to the simplest terms, that is what they're saying. That people who are different are, the woke mind virus, and they're just, it's ridiculous. So generations ahead are going to look back on this and be like, this is embarrassing. This is truly just, it's insanity. And I'm glad that it's starting to look as insane as it is. But yeah, for putting it in perspective, then they have these award shows and these, game shows and reality shows where you basically just get to watch a bunch of rich people, in the Hunger Games metaphor would be like the people on the Capitol, just have their rich lives and, do all of these incredible things. And you are just using this as a distraction. You just sit there in your life that, is completely unfair. The table is tilted against you. And instead of doing something about it, you're just sitting there staring at a screen, watching people who are doing way better than you in a completely unfair way just have fun with each other. And sometimes you might even crave to one day be like them. You want to be on that show. You want to be rich. And that's, I think, what drives the sense of unfairness. We don't see how can we make it fair? How can we fix the imbalance and make it so that everything is fair for everyone? What we instead see is, how can I be like the people who are treating me like shit? How can I get, because if they can do it, maybe I can too. And that's what they bank on. They want you to think that. They want you to think that maybe someday you'll be like them, but they know that's not the case. They've set it up so that it's unlikely to be the case. They don't teach you in school how to be successful. They teach you how to be afraid, how to not take risks, how to not listen to your intuition, how to not do anything with the ideas that you have, so that you stay just a cog in a machine. That's what they condition you to do from the time you're born, because that's what helps them. You are the one making their money. You're doing the work for them. You're selling their shit. You're keeping them famous. You're allowing this to happen. You're like a pyramid, and they're at the top, but it's a pyramid of human beings, and you're holding them up at the top. So they need you to hold them. If you walk away, they're going to fall. So, if one or two people walk away, it won't really make a difference. But if everyone walks away, now we're getting somewhere. And yeah, it'll collapse. But then what? We can rebuild. And we're going to have to, because it's going to collapse either way. Like, that's what I think people are not realizing, is that this is not going to last. It's not a question of, do we make it collapse or not? It's a question of when and how it collapses, and if we're ready when it does. Because if we're not, we might not be able to rebuild. There might not be any coming back. And it just depends on how bad it is, how long we let it go before we actually try to do something about it. And it doesn't need to be the end of the world. It's really not necessary, but it is a possibility. I won't pretend it in any other way. It's a possibility because people are real dumb and people have weapons, explosive, powerful nuclear weapons, and I don't trust humans at all. In fact, I think the people who have those weapons are the most mentally unstable and immature, dangerous people in the world. So that is just something that you kind of have to make peace with. And a bit of advice to anyone who is, always worried about this. I understand it. It makes sense because it's a legitimate fear, but you have to learn to regulate your emotions. You can't just be constantly driven by fear because you're not going to get anywhere that way. You have to say, okay, this sucks. It's pretty much a mess, but I can detach myself from it because I know that, no matter what happens, I still am part of the fabric of the universe. I will still exist. Everything is still connected. Love still exists. The people that I love, the sense of hope, the emotion about caring about other people that drives me to do things will be there regardless of what happens. And you can always do the right thing. So regardless of what stupid decisions other people make and how it affects you, you will never lose your ability to do the right thing. And you have to let that bring you peace. You have to let that calm you down and not freak you out all the time. If you live in a state of fear, you're no better. You're just, you're not even making your own decisions. You're just reacting. Everything is a reaction. Everything is panicking. And then you start to try and control other things. And eventually, before you know it, you'll be controlling other people. And then you'll lose your relationships because nobody wants to be controlled. So then you'll end up alone. And that's not what you want. No one wants that. So you have to regulate your emotions. I know it's overwhelming. I know the world is a mess and life is scary, but you can't be afraid all the time. You literally physically cannot do it. You'll get sick, mental stuff bleeds into physical stuff. You can get diseases just from being afraid all the time or having placebo effect. That's the proof. That's what I'm talking about. The placebo effect is proof that you can have physical symptoms from something that's mental. So anyway, yeah, you gotta understand. It's kind of like you want to have George Carlin's mentality. He believed that we were screwed. He believed that we were just a species circling the drain, and he had no stake in the outcome. He didn't care how it turned out. He just was gonna do what he was gonna do. Making sure he was maintaining his integrity, doing the right thing, doing what he believed was right, treating people right on an individual, personal basis, and having relationships with his family and making sure he felt happy. But regarding how it turned out for the collective, he didn't give a shit. And he believed that it wasn't going to turn out well. He had no hope. And he was right. It didn't get fixed before he died. But I still think that that there's a chance that it could get turned around. But I'm not going to pretend that that's the direction we're headed. It's just a possibility. It's not a guarantee. So I wanna help. And I think to put it in perspective, you want to look back on it. So to wrap this up, looking back on the past, if you're imagining what the world now would look like in a few generations, what you're probably going to see is that we were just in a really bad position with a bunch of really stupid, arrogant people who did not know what they were doing. And eventually, hopefully, we turned things around and we created a world where when you hear that someone's going to outlaw price gouging groceries, that you don't get angry about that and you say, oh, good, now I'll be able to afford food. But the reaction you have is, that's communism? That's really weird. First of all, from what I understand, communism isn't even a bad thing. I just don't think people know what it is for the most part. I haven't heard anything bad about it, but I'm not going to pretend to fully understand it. I just, I have yet to find a reason to think of it as a bad idea. However, I don't like to label my ideas about fixing things, because I think it's kind of weird to just assume that a system for a society to function is one of a few different options rather than something no one's thought of yet. We should always be thinking of new things instead of just integrating a system somebody else already thought of. So, even if it's really similar to communism or socialism, I can envision something without learning from any of those ideas. I can envision an ideal world and how things should work. And if it happens to be like one of those things, it is what it is. I didn't do it on purpose. But I still just find it really odd how people have such a stigmatization against this concept. And who does that benefit? It's certainly not you. And if this should make it more clear than ever. The whole Kamala Harris thing, like, she said she was going to make it illegal, intended to make it illegal if she gets elected, for food to be sold at a ridiculous price. And they're saying, hey, that's not fair. What if one day, this is essentially what they're really saying, what if one day I become some, millionaire who owns a food corporation, and I wanna overcharge people? You're saying that I wouldn't be allowed to do that? That's not fair. That's too invasive. Leave my privacy alone. If anything's invasive, it's the way that they determine if you're paying your taxes. My God. And who does that, who does that help? Certainly not the rich people who don't pay any fucking taxes and have no consequences when they don't, because they have a team of lawyers. So it's easier for the IRS to go after poor people. So it's a mess. And what they do with your tax dollars is a whole other question. That's not even, it's insane. Right now, a lot of your tax dollars have been used to fund the genocide of Palestinians, which is, again, how is no one saying what the fuck? Like, it's considered controversial to be against genocide right now. People are saying it isn't genocide. We're past that point. They've made it very clear that the goal is to completely make them go extinct. Donald Trump even said, finish the job. Like, what does that mean? We're past that point. It is genocide. You should not be in favor of it because they're human beings. Period. And the relationship between Palestine and Israel is not one I feel like getting into. It's a little too complicated, and I don't fully understand it. I understand the basics. I've had it explained to me from a few different people from different perspectives, and what I currently understand is that it's irrelevant until we stop killing people. Then we can figure out what to do about it. But what needs to be nipped in the bud is stop killing innocent people who are not part of a team, they're not part of a terrorist organization, they're just trying to survive because you screwed them and you're trying to kill them. And people are in favor of this. People are like, yeah, you're what is the word? Anti-Semitic. If you're not in favor of this genocide, you're anti-Semitic. That's not a good message to send. Jewish people deserve better than to be told that, in order to be liked, that you have to be in favor of genocide. It's insane. It's complicated, but again, people are not imaginative when it comes to solutions to problems, and people find it way too easy to just say, I'm just going to kill people. George Carlin said, he described like the mammalian brain, the reptilian brain, and stuff like that. I'm going to categorize it as there are 3 different types of people. People who say, and again, I'm quoting George Carlin, give peace a chance. People who say, give peace a chance, but first let's kill this motherfucker. And the last one, let's just kill the motherfucker, go to the peace rally, and get laid. And honestly, that's kind of what we're dealing with, is that there are too many people who are in the middle. If you're just going to say, let's just kill the motherfucker, go to the peace rally, and get laid, at least you're just owning that that's the way you operate. But a lot of these people try to pretend that they have integrity, try to say, give peace a chance, but first let's kill this motherfucker because he's in my way. There's a conflict, there's cognitive dissonance taking place where they are not fully operating in the belief that peace is important. They're making exceptions. They're trying to have it both ways, have their cake and eat it too. That's a problem. I would rather them just say the third option and just be all in, because at least that way they're not trying to pretend anything else. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in power who are absolute cowards, and they will not take a stance. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to pretend they're good people. And you really have to learn that when you decide something is wrong, you have to be consistent in that. It's wrong, even if it's easy, even if it's convenient, even if you can't imagine a third way. I promise you, there's always a third way, and you're not going to find it if you keep tuning out the neurodivergent people, the different people, the LGBT community, the minorities, women, children, young people, people of color. You have to listen to people who are different, disabled people, mentally, people whose brains work differently. You have to listen to these people, because if you don't, you're never going to find the solutions. You just keep doing things the same old way over and over again, and then what happens? You find yourself in a position where you don't know how to get out of the situation. So you take the coward's way out. You compromise your integrity. You go against your belief of give peace a chance, and you say, but first let's kill this motherfucker. And that is shameful. You should be ashamed of yourself, and you should just go hide somewhere. Stop being around people. No one likes you. No one wants to be around someone who doesn't have integrity. No one wants to be around someone who can't be trusted, who might just, turn them in the right circumstances. A friendship that is constantly at risk of betrayal. You might just throw your best friend under the bus if it saved your ass. No one wants to be around that kind of person. You don't want to be that kind of person, and you better not be bullshitting yourself about not being that kind of person. I just saw a video called no, it didn't have a title. My friend sent me a video. It was a clip from like a podcast interview with Taylor Swift, and it just was a guy saying, "I'm a nice guy. I consider myself a nice guy. I would never. I don't have a malicious bone in my body or something." And Taylor goes, "In my experience, guys who call themselves nice guys never actually turn out to be nice guys." And he goes, "Well, I didn't say I'm a nice guy. I'm not a nice guy. I didn't say that." And she goes, "You just said it like 10 seconds ago." Which just proved the point. He instantly started gaslighting her because he was in a state of panic. He was thinking, hold on, it's actually more important that I convince her that I'm a good person than it is to actually be a good person. So that's what these people do. They're so concerned with how they appear, with their image. It's all based on fear. That fundamental belief that everything will be okay as long as they do the right thing does not exist within them. They have no sense of self, no sense of connection to other people, no sense of trust, faith, love. They're all ego. They're all fear, control, manipulation. And I've never heard a good person describe themselves as a nice guy. You should not have to go out of your way to tell people that you're a good person. It's like, it should be obvious. And it's not a good idea. So yeah, that's the problem. That's what happens when you let ego take over, is it becomes about control, and you never want to give in to fear. So bottom line is, be open to new suggestions. There is always a third way. You'll be okay no matter what you think. It's like, oh, it's A or B. If I choose A, everything will turn to shit. And if I choose B, it'll fix everything, but I have to compromise my beliefs about what's right and wrong. So, I don't know, I promise you, not only is there a C, there's an infinite alphabet, because you don't have to believe this, but in my belief system, you are immortal. You, as who you are as a being, you're infinite. You're part of an infinite universe. You're never just going to be completely out of time and done existing. And let's just say you are. Then what difference does it make if you screw everything up? Eventually you won't exist and nothing will matter, right? If the universe isn't infinite, then eventually it won't exist and nothing will matter. So either way, it's okay to relax. There's no such thing as hell where you're going to be burned and tortured for eternity with no way out. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a permanent punishment that cannot be reversed or gotten out of. It's because that's just not how things work. So we need to start realizing that there are other options. It isn't as simple as just this or that. And sometimes, even if you can't think of a third option, you have to choose the one that doesn't compromise your integrity. That's always the safe bet to lean on. Whichever one you can think of that doesn't feel like it goes against what you believe to be wrong. And a good place to get your beliefs is your intuition. You don't want to get it from somebody else telling you what's right and wrong. That should be common sense, but to a lot of people it isn't. They think that by reading the Bible, they're getting their beliefs from God, but if that is the case, you should already know it. It should be intuitive. It should just be logical, because God is logic. God is everything. God, everything you are came from God. So you shouldn't need to read it in a book to know if it's right or wrong. You shouldn't need any outside source, okay? That's how you get people trying to control you. So you know the difference between right and wrong. There's studies that, people have asked people of different cultures and backgrounds and religions. Everyone generally has the same ideas about what's right and wrong, very similar among all cultures, which tells me that there is an innate belief underneath everything that people know the difference between right and wrong, if only they tune out all of the bullshit. Your religion is part of that. I hate to tell you, you don't need to read a book or listen to a preacher to tell you what's right and wrong, to tell you how things work, okay? You can figure it out yourself. You already know. So anyway, this was longer than I wanted it to be. I'm sorry that I'm late, but like I said, wouldn't let me go live. Not my fault. I tried. I might have to start pre-recording more of my videos if this keeps up, but it's not a big deal. Have a good night. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next week on my other channel on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Other channel is in the description. Excuse me. I appreciate every like, comment, and subscription, because I'm a very small channel, so every little bit helps.